I now start the clock.
It was a long weekend.
Yeah. Okay, is everybody done? Down over. All right, thank you. This will help me improve the course. All right, between now and the next exam, we're going to be covering 3 topics that all kind of naturally go together. So we're going to be spending 2 weeks on arguments for God's existence. Then we'll spend a week on the problem of evil. And then we're going to spend a week on the issue of free will and determinism. So, arguments for God's existence. As an introduction to this, I think it's useful to think a little bit about what people believe about God. And where do people stand on this issue? Well, of course, there are a lot of polling organizations out there that try to gauge what people believe. And one of them is the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life. So if we look at religious belief in the U.S., I don't know how readable this is from the back of the class. Probably not at all. Okay, too small. But if you look at this, and this is a survey done 5 years ago, so 2008, roughly 78% of Americans identify as Christian. Other religions, 4.7%, so 1.7% Jewish, and then they break it down in terms of different varieties of Judaism. 0.7% Buddhist, 0.6% Muslim, 0.4% Hindu, less than 0.3% of other world religions, other faiths 1.2%, and then unaffiliated, which includes atheist, agnostic, nothing in particular, and both secular and religious unaffiliated, that's 16.1%. And then just less than 1% of people either don't know what they believe or refuse to answer the question. So, obviously in the U.S., then a pretty large percentage, majority Christian. If we look at this worldwide, and again this comes from the Pew Forum, worldwide, Christians about 32%, Islam about 23%, Hindus 15%, and so on. And this is kind of an interesting chart because it shows in different parts of the world what the breakdown is. Okay? So if you look at Christianity, well, this percentage are in the Asian Pacific area, this percent in Sub-Saharan Africa, this percent in Europe, this percent in Latin America, this part North America, and then the Middle East, North Africa here. So it's interesting that for Christianity, only that percentage of them, right, of Christians are in North America. There's actually much larger percentages in Sub-Saharan Africa, Europe, and Latin America. Jews, not surprisingly, are concentrated largely in the Middle East and North Africa, and then also North America. Buddhists, not surprisingly, right, almost entirely in the Asian Pacific Rim area. Same with Hindus, and so on. Okay. This just kind of shows the same information differently. So we look at majority religion by country. So the red, that's Christianity. Muslims here in North Africa, the Middle East. Unaffiliated, interestingly, in China, and that's part of their whole political situation, and their banning of traditional folk religions. So you get this huge percentage of people in China who are unaffiliated with anything. Hindus, largely concentrated, of course, around India. Buddhists here in South Asia, and interestingly up here in Mongolia, and so on. Okay, so that kind of gives us a picture of religious belief throughout the world and in the United States. As philosophers, we want to ask this question, well, why believe in God? Now, when we ask this question, we have to be very careful to be clear what it is that we're asking. Because when we ask the question, why believe in God, we can make a distinction here between so-called pragmatic reasons as opposed to epistemic reasons. What exactly does that mean? Well, pragmatic reasons focus on the benefits of believing in God, or the bad consequences of not believing. So I'm sure you've seen, periodically in the press, you'll see studies that come out that show that people who believe in God, they tend to be happier, they tend to live longer, right? These sorts of things. Those are pragmatic reasons for believing in God. So, somebody asks the question, why should I believe in God? Well, because there's all these great benefits I can take from it. Bless you. Well, that's certainly a kind of reason, but it's not an epistemic reason. Now, an example of an argument for why you should believe in God that focuses on pragmatic reasons is called Pascal's wager, formulated by the 17th century philosopher and mathematician Blaise Pascal. How many of you are familiar with this? Okay, good. So how does this go?
Just that you might as well believe in God, because if there isn't a God, then it doesn't matter, because if you believe in it and no one's there, it's hard to explain, kind of.
Okay.
So you might as well believe, because if there isn't one,
It's not going to hurt you at all.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. But if there is, it'll benefit you a lot.
And what if you don't believe in God?
Then it'll just be bad.
Only if there is a God, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Kind of like the phrase, I'd rather believe in it and be disappointed than not believe in it and be ashamed.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So, we can set this up in a chart, right? So, the basic idea here is you have two options. Actually, let me put not believe on top. So you can either believe in God or not believe. And then, of course, there's two possible states of affairs. God exists, or God doesn't exist. So suppose that you believe and it turns out that God exists. Consequences?
Go to heaven.
Okay. So really good, right? In fact, it's infinitely good, according to Pascal. So infinitely positive. Can't get any better than that. Suppose that you believe, and it turns out that God doesn't exist.
Well, then you're just dead.
Okay.
It's over with.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about it.
So you don't, right? Maybe there's some benefits, right? So health, stronger community, right? So maybe you have a strong faith community that you live in, and so you develop good friendships and da-da-da-da-da. But it's not the benefits that if God exists. Now, might there be some disadvantages if you believe in God? Yeah, yeah.
If you spent all your money giving your money to the church, thinking that God existed and stuff, and if that affected your life in a negative way, to where you were financially not able to
Yeah, because you could use that money for
Yeah, for anything.
New cars, right? Booze, whatever. So,
And also, you can give time to church a lot too. So I guess.
depending on the church.
Yeah,
sure.
depending upon the church.
Yeah.
So how much time you give, you can't give your time back.
Yeah, so there's gonna be some benefits, but also, some sacrifices that you make. Maybe you're not gonna have quite as much fun, right? In a hedonistic sort of way. But overall, that's not too bad, yeah.
It gives you focus, even if it doesn't exist, it still gives you focus to go in a certain lifestyle.
Okay, so that's again, some of the benefits that can,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, good. Now, so we could add that there, definitely. If you don't believe, and God doesn't exist,
Doesn't matter.
okay, doesn't matter, right? Except again, think about the impact on your life now.
You have all free choice. You know, go to, I don't know. It's not really, it's weird to describe.
So,
It's like, you didn't make that many sacrifices.
yeah, so there's fewer restrictions on how you live. But the flip side of this, of course, is,
You don't have to worry about it.
you're not gonna get these benefits.
You don't have, I would say you don't have depth, you can't come to, like Maslow's triangle, you can't come to that self-actualization because there's no goal to shoot for. You just kind of existence.
Maybe,
What if
maybe
you
not. I
make
mean,
your
that's
own
the,
goal?
that's the whole
But then what do you
existentialist.
believe?
That's the whole existentialist problem, right, is if you can create meaning for yourself within your life in the absence of God. Okay. But, you're gonna miss out on, the certain benefits
Looking forward.
of believing, right? But if you don't believe in God exists, uh-oh, right? So Pascal says, that's infinitely negative. You screwed up. So, here's your options then. You can either believe or not. If you believe, then either you're going to get infinite good and maybe some good, maybe some bad. If you don't believe, infinite bad, maybe some good, maybe some bad. So given those two options, what's the better choice? Okay, yeah.
Well, if you don't truly believe, you can't just force yourself to believe just for the sake of the benefit to come from it.
That's, okay. That's a really interesting philosophic issue, right? Is whether you can, will yourself to believe something, right? And philosophers disagree about this. Yeah, good. Let's bracket that and set it aside for another class. I mean, that's a fascinating question. So, William James, who's an American philosopher, early 20th century, wrote an important work on this, right? The will to believe.
I was curious, what if you don't believe, but you live a good life, like everything that the church teaches you and stuff, just because that's what you believe yourself, like you think that everyone should be nice and kind to everyone and stuff.
Well, again, then you
If
get
don't
some
believe,
benefits.
you still get the benefits if God does exist, but like, if you're still.
Well, Pascal doesn't think so.
Oh, okay.
Right?
I was just curious.
Yeah.
That would be determined by which church or which beliefs of which grouping you
Right.
are associated.
Yeah, see, now you've put your finger on something important here, because Pascal's saying, well, obviously, the smart thing to do then is to believe. But what you're suggesting is, well, that's true if you suppose a certain
Religions.
belief about God, right, or a certain conception of God.
Because there's some religions that believe that even if you didn't have the chance, or even if you didn't know about it, when you get before him, you're like, what's up, dude, who are you? He's going to be like, I am God, and you didn't know about me, so you're going straight to hell.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole separate problem. But I mean, he's addressing this to an audience who does have some conception of God and so on. So you've got to choose whether to believe or not. So, there's an objection that's raised against this. See what you think about this. It's called the shy God. Oops. objection. And the objection goes something like this. It says, well, you know, this is assuming that God, in fact, wants us to believe in him or her. But what if God is a shy God? So God put us down here, obviously isn't revealing him or herself clearly to us, right? God doesn't appear and say, well, here I am, so you better believe me, right? There's all this doubt and so on. Maybe it's because God is trying to hide from us, and God doesn't want followers. And boy, if you do believe in God, God's going to be mad and punish you.
I would wish I got objection.
Now, I don't know if you buy that or not, but the point is, right, in order to accept Pascal's wager, you do have to buy into a certain conception of God. And you see how it's focusing on pragmatic reasons. It doesn't have to do with epistemic reasons. So what do we mean by epistemic reasons? Well, epistemic reasons focus on evidence for the truth of the proposition God exists. So that's what we're going to be focusing on here in this class. All right, so this raises the question, well, what sort of arguments are there out there? I'll give you a chance, right? This is all posted online, right? You don't have to copy that, right?
I guess some people would argue the Bible would be some evidence that God exists.
That what would be?
The Bible, since everyone.
Yeah, possibly.
All the stories about Jesus and everything.
Possibly so. But let's back away from specific arguments for the moment. Let's talk about categories of arguments. So here's some of the traditional arguments for God's existence. Now we can distinguish these arguments in various ways. First of all, we can distinguish them in terms of whether they are deductive or inductive. So here are these important concepts that we introduced, right, that first week of the semester. So there are arguments that try to establish God's existence conclusively, and arguments that try to establish God's existence probabilistically. So there's better reason than not for believing in God, non-conclusive. So that's one sort of distinction we can make. Here's a pair of terms we haven't seen before, a couple of Latin terms. Arguments can be distinguished on whether they are a priori or a posteriori. An a priori claim or argument is one that is independent of experience. It's not based on experience. So it's tied to rationalism. An a posteriori claim, then, is based on experience. Now, again, we can take these two distinctions